Hello, everyone. This red carpet gives a lot of pressure. And this is a very familiar stage for me, but an unfamiliar audience. And there are four simple ways I like to introduce myself whenever I get to interact with an audience for the very first time. So first, my name is Philomena Esi Agudu. I'm 23 years of age and a fifth-year medical student here at the University of Cape Coast. I'm an award-winning singer, but only in the bathroom. And for those of you who know and can relate, you know that bathrooms are the most cost-effective and underrated music studios here on the planet. And finally, until recently, I do consider myself an entrepreneur. Um, because I like to mind my own business. And by my own, I mean my life. So celebrity gossip, drama, friendships, and negative vibes are generally not my thing. To the actual entrepreneurs here in the house, pardon me for this very strange definition of entrepreneurship. But I have a very interesting question for us all today. Kindly show by hand. How many of us sometimes get the feeling that our lives are boring? Anybody? I'll ask a question, a more familiar question. How many of accused of having boring? How many of us have been accused of having boring lives, told to get a life? I'm liking the courage in here. You're not alone. One particular night before end of year exam week, I remember just sitting behind my desk and my mind is so congested after hours of cramming and reviewing. And as a function of habit, I switched tabs to engage my YouTube subscriptions. And seeing the living experiences of people my age triggered a strange sense of discontent I had not felt in a very long time. And I know a lot of us kind of do this sometimes. Everyone seems to be immersed in one adventure or the other, hopscotching the continents and doing new things and meeting life partners and so many other things. And there's a crude voice in my head that says to me the same question I posed to you a while ago. Why is my life so boring? Fortunately, the answer to the question doesn't have to be immediate. The theme for this TEDx event reminds us that we are not wired to figure out life in a day. From chrysalis to butterfly, it takes time, most of the time. Your life deserves the number one fun, you. And that's exactly what this presentation is all about. Why you think your life is boring and how we can own and maximize our so-called boring lives and own it unapologetically. Are you ready? So first, context. Boring generally refers to anything dull, blunt, monotonous, uninteresting. And research by Elizabeth Goodstein states that boredom can be a subjective and an objective concept, meaning that it can be defined on our own terms, but also by the experiences and opinions of other people. And as long as there are different preferences and interests of people. We can't have one particular definition of what boring is supposed to look like. And that's very profound because that means that people's experiences determine what they call you. Do you see? So that's why I asked you the question, how many of us have been accused of being boring? Because it's from their experience and their perspective that they can accuse you of that. So when we have that understanding that boring can be a subjective construct, it goes a long way. Unfortunately, in the 21st century, we have how look on what because we have preferences and beliefs to what a fulfilling life is supposed to look like. Our lives these days epitomize pots of soups and stews. We feel this inherent need to always have to spice it up, always need to be stimulated. And so for some of us, what that means is that every Saturday we have to be somewhere, every weekend. We've never spent a weekend at home all alone before. Harmless question. When was the last time you had time to yourself and actually spent it on just yourself? No social media, no kind of external validation or stimulation. When was the last time? Right. The interesting thing is that, like any kind of pot of stew or soup, there's only so much spice you can add. And so it's perfectly healthy and normal to have a life where it looks as if nothing is happening. To have a life where it looks like there's no adventure for it. Routines and monotony are sometimes dominant, where everything is the same. To answer $1 million question, you probably think your life is boring on account of two indicators. The first is what I like to call the comparison trap. The irony is that for most of us, the truth is you call something boring because in your mind there's something else you compare it to. Is that right? Aha. And the human mind is a filter. Will always keep contrasting and comparing different things. Now, research by Global Web Index tells us that 52.3% of the world's population uses social media. Next time you ask yourself, where did all the time go? Consider checking your social media usage or your screen time. You see where all the time has been. So it's very interesting that sometimes our time goes and we don't know that we are the ones who use the time. So with the comparison trap, to remember is that the experiences of others we get to see on social media as a young our own lives. And so you're looking at someone else's life, and that's how you feel your own life is boring. But your story matters, all of it. So let's not be chronically distracted, especially in this age where we are updated on so much and yet transformed by so little. The second reason why we feel our lives are boring is by virtue of identity crisis. I remember in freshman year, I was invited to a pool party somewhere outside of campus. And to be very honest with you, this is my very first time on UCC campus alone. I'm staying alone. I don't know how the environment is supposed to look like. There's so much on my plate. I'm adapting to a whole lot. And so there was no way I could have been a part of that event. And so I said the first word I learned to say in my transition from childhood to adulthood. I said no. And as you would imagine, I was labeled the boring one, the trying to do the most. The truth of the matter is that the boring definition in this generation, in this 21st century, is sometimes a weapon to terrorize those who choose to have a voice of their own, who are audacious about saying no, who won't join bandwagons carelessly. And so it's okay to be called boring if you have a value system to uphold, if you have a priority to uphold, if you have interests and preferences you're not afraid to be vocal about. At the center of sometimes why we think our lives are boring is a dysfunctional perspective of self. We prefer the authenticity, we prefer the expedition of pretending to the authenticity of becoming. How exactly can we make so-called boring lives and do what we know to do best? First, by a perspective shift. Now, a perspective shift is critical because it influences our priorities, our principles, and our practices. So we have to understand, as previously stated, that when it comes to the word boring or the definition boring, there's no standard definition. People define it based on their own subjective contrast. So practically speaking, what I challenge all of us to do today is to have a personal opinion of our lives beyond the provision of social media and civilization at large. I'm challenging us, each and every one of us, to define boring on our own terms, to never treat our lives as the books we open but never read. And secondly and finally, through mindfulness. I'll say it in a very, very simple but honest and good catchphrase. Mind your own business. And by mind your own business, I mean first get interested in your life and you begin to see it as interesting. And so I want to challenge each and every one of us here today, as much as we can try, to be mindful in our experiences. And the truth is, you don't have to be an entrepreneur to learn to mind your own business. Maybe it's not all about wearing brands or marketing brands. It's about becoming a brand. So find your brand, live your brand, and be your brand. Thank you.